Everybody, this is again hopefully a short video where I'm reviewing the answers to lab number 3 and 4. I'm going to do both t-test labs in this one video. And so let's start with lab 3. And so that's the independent t-test. So it asks you first about the steps. And so remember to do an outline. So just you could bullet point, analyze, bullet point, compare means, bullet point, independent samples t-test, bullet point, put your group variable into the grouping variable, define your groups, and I'm fine if you just say define your groups. In this case, remember we defined our groups. This was the audio condition, which the authors thought would be higher than the transcript condition. So I put 1, which was the audio here, and then the transcript here, because that's the direction it's going to be subtracting it. So it's going to be a positive t-test if they're right. It doesn't necessarily matter how you do this. As long as you look at your means and your output, you'll see that they're different. At least you'll see the direction of the difference, I should say. And we'll talk about this when we look at the output. Then bullet point, put your dv in the test variable. In this case, we actually put 3, but it doesn't matter. You can just say dv in the test variable. And then voila, press OK. And you should have your output, which is right there. So that's question number 1. What are the steps? You can just have the bullet points be very simple. And then number 2, SPSS, for whatever reason, gives us a two-tailed significance level. Remember that I said in the video that the authors believe that the audio condition is going to be higher than the transcript condition in all of those evaluator ratings, the higher, the recruiter's ratings of the job candidate. And so given that we get a two-tailed t-test, we have to divide that by 2 to get the one-tailed significance. So I'm going to look at the output. So it's asking for sentences, including for the 95 CI, but not the effect size. And so let me go to that. So we have just one output for lab number 3. It's this output, but we have 3 t-tests in here. So we have 3 separate tests that we need to write up. So I'm going to actually do this bit by bit so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to snip it. And I'm going to snip it here. But I'm going to do it piece by piece. So I might have to do 3 snippets because I don't want you to get overwhelmed with things. So I'm just going to focus first on this one. Remember there's 3 t-tests here. The first one has to do with their intellect, the ratings of their intellect. And then we have the t-test data is down here. And I said, look at the assume equal variances. So here's the same thing, the intellect. Well, we don't want the F, so here, and then we have our T information here. Sorry about that. Hard to write on this, draw on this sometimes. And we have a confidence interval here. So here's the numbers we're focusing in on. So to do our interpretation, first thing I'd look at is the significance level. Here it says 0.001. It means that there's a 0.1% chance of a type 1 error. That's really small because we think we can live with a 5% chance. So if this thing, and this is even dividing it by 2, So we divide it by 2. It's really, really significant. So I should amend that. It's a 0.05% chance that we would find anything, not a 5%, way below 5%. So it's less than 0.05. So we're going to reject the HO. So the T tells us there is a difference between those two groups of audio versus transcript. And if we're not sure where the difference is, let's look at the means here. So audio has a mean of, and maybe I'll expand this a little bit so we can read it a little bit better. Audio has a mean of 5.64 if we round up, and transcript has a mean of 3.65. So obviously the recruiter thought that the people in the audio condition were smarter than the people in the transcript condition by almost 2 whole points out of 10, I believe it was. And so we know it's significant, and then we know our means and standard deviations. So the sentence then would be, for the first sentence for this t-test of intellect, recruiters rated people, candidates, job candidates in the audio condition, parentheses, mean equals 5.64, comma, standard deviation 1.61, end of parentheses. So recruiters rated candidates intellect higher if they heard the audio condition, mean standard deviation, versus the transcript condition. So versus transcript condition, parentheses, mean equals 3.65, comma, standard deviation equals 1.91. End of parentheses, comma. So that was our two groups. So we said, what were they being rated on their intellect? Which group was higher? Audio was higher than transcript. And make sure we give the mean and standard deviations for audio and transcript in parentheses. Comma, then we jump to our inferential statistics. So comma, I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it. We'll have to make it smaller in a bit for the confidence intervals. Comma, T, parentheses, 37. That's the degrees of freedom. Degrees of freedom is here if you could read it. 37. End of parentheses equals 3.53, rounding up, comma, P is less than 0.05, because this significance level was less than 0.05. So that's our sentence, just like we had in our homework and on our exam. Then we report the 95 CI. I don't know why that turned off. Then we report the 95% CI, which is right here. So that's pretty easy. The 95 CI was brackets 0.85, rounded up, comma, 3.13, and a bracket period. So that's all you need for intellect. And again, those sentences are 100% identical to the sentences that we've been writing for our exam. And before I forget, because I think I mentioned I was going to talk about this in the homework overview. No, in the lab overview for something else I was going to do, but I want to do it here. So sorry about that little bit of a juncture here. This came up in one of the live sessions. I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to make it bigger. So right, with the SPSS, it's giving us a very specific alpha level. I should say alpha, the probability of a type 1 error. It's right here. And I've been saying look for the significance that's less than 0.05. Because if it's less than 0.05, it's saying that we have less than a 5% chance of making a type 1 error. So if we have less than a 5% chance, that's our alpha of making a type 1 error, then we reject the HO. So typically we just look at this stuff in SPSS. But some people said, well, why, I'm confused because I thought we're supposed to look for a critical T. Well, we don't need to because for one, SPSS gives us the significance here. And if this sig is below 0.05 all the time for all our tests that we're going to be doing in SPSS, then we reject the HO. But if you feel uncomfortable doing that, then go ahead and if you want, you can look up the table. Go ahead and look up the T table. Your critical T will come from a degrees of freedom of 37. You'll see that this T is greater than that number on the table. So if for some reason you're having some problems with the SPSS and you want to use the tables, you can. But you don't need to because it's right here. But if you want to use a table, you can. Okay, let me get rid of this. Okay, so let me go to the next test. And again, I'm going to highlight these one by one and draw on them because I don't want to draw all three tests on one snippet because it's going to be very messy. So let me do another. And in this case, we're just going to look at, and I'm going to keep everything so you can see what I'm doing. Here's the whole output again, and I'm going to expand to make things easier to see, although I can't really drag it. So this test, the second t-test, is about the candidate's overall impression on the recruiter. Right here, the second line. And again, we have the audio versus transcript condition here. And we have the two means, and we have the two standard deviations. And just looking at the means right away, it looks like audio is higher than the transcript. If we just look at this, 5.96, which 5.97 is higher than 4.07. But we don't know if it's significant. We have to look down below. And so again, we're here with the second test, overall impression. And we stick here again. Equal variance is assumed. We'll just keep it easy. Easy peasy. We have the T, degrees of freedom, and the sig, two-tailed sig. So if we look at this, we're going to look at this sig. We don't even have to divide it by 2, but you're supposed to divide it by 2 to get the specific one, but then we have 0.0035. So in this case, we have a 0.35, so 35th of a hundredths percent chance of making a type 1 error. So this sig is definitely less than 0.05. And so we reject the HO. So we reject the HO. So there is a difference. So this little difference that we observed earlier, just looking at the mean differences, it came out to be significant. So that is a difference that we can rely on. Again, if you are worried about how to do that, if you want to take our T that is here in this column, I'm sorry, in this row, go to the table, the T table, with this degrees of freedom, 37 degrees of freedom, you'll find that this T that was calculated by SPSS is significantly higher than the T in your critical T table, so you would reject the HO. But it's very simple if we just do it with our sig level. So now we have our first sentence. We know that there's a significant difference between those two groups, and we can just simply state it. So in terms of the recruiter's overall impressions of the candidate, the audio condition, mean 5.97, standard deviation 1.92 in parentheses, was greater than the transcript condition, parentheses, mean is equal to 4.07, comma, standard deviation equals 2.23, end of parentheses, comma. So again, in terms of overall impression, audio is greater than transcript. Make sure to give the mean and standard deviations for the groups in parentheses, comma, you give the t-test, the staff stuff, comma, t, it's a t, it doesn't say t here, it should, t, parentheses, 37 degrees of freedom, end of parentheses, equals 2.85 is the t here, comma, p is less than 0.05, period. So again, it's just like what we did in our homework and on our exam. Our last sentence will be the 95% confidence interval. The 95% CI was brackets 0.55, comma, 3.24, end of brackets, period. So those are the two sentences for the second t-test, looking at the candidate's overall impression on the recruiter. Let's do the third t-test. And let me snip it so I can write on it again. Oops. It's annoying when that happens. So let me snip it. Hey, yeah. That's really annoying. Sorry about that. At least you can fast forward to this. I'm stuck. I'm stuck in this reality. Okay, here we go. Here is the output again. And we're on the third and final t-test. So this one, the third one, is how likely are they to hire the candidate? Again, comparing audio versus transcript. We have the means. If we just look at that real quickly, it's 4.71 versus 2.89. Looks like it's a pretty big difference. And then we have the standard deviations here. But again, we can't just eyeball it. We have to look at the t-test. But we know that audio is greater than transcript by just looking at that. So again, we want to look at the t stuff for this likelihood of hiring the candidate. Stick on the equal variance. We want to get this stuff. There's our main t things. Our t-test, our degrees of freedom, and our significance. So here's our t, degrees of freedom, and significance. And again, officially we're supposed to divide that by 2 because it's a two-tailed significance level, because we had a prediction. We had a prediction of audio is greater than transcript. But we can see here that it's going to be like 0.007 or 65. I'm just rounding it up. So basically it's a 0.7% chance. And we can live with a 5% chance. So we're far away from that. So again, this significance level right here, it's less than 0.05. Again, we can live with a 5% chance of a type 1 error. This says we're much lower than that. So given that, we reject the HO. which means there's a difference between our two groups, audio versus transcript. And now we can write our first sentence. In terms of the likelihood of hiring the candidate, the audio condition, mean 4.71, standard deviation 2.26, these are in parentheses again, was greater than the transcript condition, parentheses, mean is 2.89, comma, standard deviation 2.06, if we get official in terms of the rounding. So that's our first phrase. In terms of likelihood to hire the candidate, audio is greater than transcript. And make sure you include the mean and standard deviations in parentheses for the two groups. Then we put a comma, then we put our inferential stat stuff. So T, we did a t-test, T, parentheses, 37 degrees of freedom, equals, here's our T, 2.62, comma, P is less than 0.05. Period. That's the first sentence. Then we just need to include the confidence interval. The 95% CI was 0.41, comma, 3.24, end of parentheses. And again, with all these significant tests, t-tests, we see that our confidence interval does not pass through 0. So 0 is not a likely possibility when we take those two means and subtract them from each other. So if they were 0, it would mean that they are equal in terms of their means. There's no difference between the groups. We don't pass 0, so it's not likely that those groups are equal. There's a difference. Well, what's the difference? Audio is greater than transcript. So hopefully this video has helped you with your lab, and there was 3 of them, and you didn't need to listen to all 3 if you felt good about the first one, but if you're listening to this, then you listen for everyone, which is good. So I will talk to you later.